But she's got all the history of everybody back about 4 generations, and she's got a big one of those trees that my sister printed out. She's filling all the blanks in and everything. So, and I got some of the information from her off just my grandparents and stuff.
Okay. So let's see. What do you have? Do you have who was the first one to come to Fort Pierce?
That was Herbert Trenton Ebner.
Okay, and that would be.
That was my grandfather, and with my grandmother Alice. Her was Alice West. She was anyway. They came from Charleston, South Carolina,
okay.
And sometime before, because we came to Fort Pierce in '44, and they came sometime previous to that because there was a home here at that time. They lived on the drive.
Okay.
Then.
Are you saying the West family?
No,
Here?
Ebner.
Ebner.
Herbert Trenton Ebner. Came here sometime before '44, because we came here in '44,
Okay.
and Pop was already here at that time, and then in '44 my dad and Mom came, and
You weren't born in Fort Pierce.
I was not. No. I came here when I was 2.
That's
But
close enough.
yeah, that's it. My wife is a 4th generation Floridian,
Okay.
so
And
from
so-
Delray Beach.
All right. So now let's go to your father.
Anyway, my father was born in Charleston, South Carolina, Herbert Lewis Ebner, and my mother was born in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
It used to be in the 30s there were trailer parks. One of them still exists, is Ocean Breeze, and there was one in Melbourne. And people used to come down there in the wintertime. Ocean Breeze still exists today. The one in Melbourne is gone, but that's where they met. Was that the families used to come down and stay in these trailer parks.
Where's the one here?
Ocean Breeze in
Is that
Jensen.
The one toward Jensen?
The one in Jensen is
Yeah,
still there.
My mother's aunt and her family would come down until they did.
In the
just
30s, yeah.
A few years ago after she passed away.
Yeah, but I mean, it's been going on. We think now everybody's doing it, but because Mom and Dad used to go up to Melbourne to visit old friends of theirs, and they had friends that once they left the trailer park, then they go ahead and go and stayed in the areas there. So, but they met there, and then my grandfather had what was called a crab factory, a fishing place or crab factory in Folly Beach, or on Folly Beach, South Carolina. And when he sold that to move down here, then my dad was left there. My dad was a welder. He wasn't in the family business. He was a welder at the shipyard in Charleston.
Oh, okay.
And so after my grandfather left, my dad sold his house there on Folly Beach, and sort of followed my dad. And then my uncle, Earl Ebner, came down about that time. I don't know dates or anything of that.
Okay.
But I know we came here in '44.
Okay. How about your dad's brothers and sisters?
Well, that was
What's their
Earl
names?
Earl Ebner,
And then
and Alice was the grandmother, Alice West Ebner. She was from Norfolk area.
she was married to
Herbert Trenton Ebner.
okay.
And Earl was married to Claudia Zobel from Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
And
Dealing with that, Sharon.
I'm lost.
Okay.
I'm confused between Herbert Trenton Ebner and
Herbert Trenton Ebner and Alice West Ebner were my grandparents.
okay.
My dad was Herbert Lewis Ebner, married to Mommy. It's gone blank. Anyway, Twitchell. Anyway, and then he had a brother, and it was just the 2 brothers. Was Earl Ebner and Claudia Ebner, and they had 3 children: Bobby Joe, Trent, and Rick.
Wait, who had the 3 children?
Earl,
Earl.
Earl, and Claudia.
Wow, I'm totally confused here.
you have it written down on there, maybe?
No, that's,
Oh, this is another note.
Why don't you just go ahead and
yeah.
do the
Okay.
interview?
All
We'll
right.
catch up with it.
All right, well, tell us a little bit about your family's history here.
Well, we came in '44, like I say, and Dad bought the building he had a chance to buy, I guess he had some money, a little bit of money anyway, but he had a chance to buy a building in downtown Lake Worth across from City Hall, or this property in Fort Pierce, and he decided to come to Fort Pierce because he felt there was a better business opportunity. And he opened a plumbing supply business at 712 Orange Avenue. And we lived in the back of the store, and he had the business in the front. And it grew to the point where
Is that the old?
it's the next to the old Knowles house. It's
Which house
Crane
is
has
that?
bought the Knowles home, which is his 710.
Okay.
Jack Crane bought the Knowles home with 710. He bought my dad's store many years later after my dad didn't sell it until after I was, anyway, gone and all that. But, so Jack Crane has named everything as 710. He's built them all together. He's got the Knoll home and Dad's building all hooked together as one building.
Oh, okay.
When you look at it.
Did you live in that house that Spanish
No, the
house?
Knowles lived in that. That was the Knowles
Okay.
people. They were Bobby Knowles, and that was his grandparents, I think.
Oh, okay.
But they were the original old Knowles, the old railroad people. Because Adrian Strickland talks about when he worked the railroad as a young waker-upper, he used to have to go to the Knowles home in the dark of night and walk around and wake people up in the Knowles home. You know, it's something he's told me recently. But so anyway, 712 Orange Avenue. So we lived there. My dad got this plumbing business going. He had the largest plumbing business in the Fort County area, and it was growing. We moved to a house out on 25th Street. After we moved out of the store, we lived in the back of the store, and it grew, and the business got bigger. He wasn't making the money that he thought he could make, so he one day told all his employees, he had all the young guys at Fort Pierce working for him, wasn't making the money he thought he would make, so he told them all he was going to Miami, and he made him a little nest over the cash register and watched him all day and saw him ripping him off and stealing from him and giving stuff away.
Oh, no.
So he came back, when he came, and you never said anything to him. He sold his business but kept the building. He sold to a Mr. McCabe. And from then on, the rest of his life, he never hired another employee or worked with anybody else ever again. It hurt him so bad.
Wow.
So anyway, so we had, that was in our life. From there went on to all the oddities of what we did. But
So wait a minute, after he did this and he didn't have any more employees, he just worked by himself?
he worked, my dad did everything. My dad was a welder in the shipyard. At one time he had a welding shop at the corner of 7th and, what is that, 7th and A. He worked for King Signs. He was a welder for King Signs for years. But his biggest thing he stayed with for years was he was used stuff, used furniture. He went down, one of his businesses he started, he went down to Miami and bought a truckload of used clothing and opened a store on Avenue D at 10th and D. And that's where he started into the used business. Before that, he had tried welding and doing other things and hadn't made anything at it. So from there, he had that store. From there, he moved to, that was around 900 block of Avenue D. Then he moved to a building which is where the courthouse is now. And by then, he was into used furniture and all that. He'd gotten out of the clothing business. And that was on 7th. Welding was anyway. That was on 5th Street where the courthouse is. He had a used furniture store there, and he moved from there then to Orange and Depot, the corner there behind Huber's, where Huber's little store was there, right on the railroad track. And then eventually, his building at 712 Orange, had been leased to different people, Mr. McCabe and different people. He got his building back, so he moved back to 712 Orange and stayed there until he got sick and was going to die and sold his business. So, you know, but he was in used furniture and all that stuff for 25, 30 years. So that's what most people know him as is
That's what I mean.
yeah, is the junk man, whatever. But so that was, so anyway, we went, that was his business and what he did. I came home after, I went in the Navy after, you know, and I came home and I was in business with him for a couple of years, and father and son don't, you know, don't do that.
Did you graduate from the Yellow Brick School?
No, I went. I was in the. I went Dan McCarty High. I graduated in '60 at Dan McCarty
I
High.
keep forgetting you're too young.
Yeah. No, we were the first. I think we were the first freshman class at Dan McCarty, weren't we?
No, there was 58. I know there was a 58, and that may have been the first. I don't remember.
Freshman class. Anyway, we went to Dan McCarty High from the old brick school, and I don't know what grade it was that we transferred over, but I thought we went as freshmen.
Yeah, ninth grade.
Yeah, so we were the first freshman class because before that they had 3 years there at high school. So.
So were you classmates?
Yeah.
Oh.
So anyway, we lived in the store. We lived on 25th Street. My dad built a house on the drive. I forget where it was at. Let's see, I wrote it down somewhere. I went out looking for all this stuff to see where it was. It was just north of Midway Road. He built a big house there. He put in the hardwood floors for my mother. It was all built up, and then he built a rental place next to it, so you have living.
Just north of Midway.
North of Midway. It was around.
Well, now the Robinson house that got torn down was right there on the corner of Midway.
Okay, well, this was at 4700 or 4701 Midway. So, I mean, anyway.
It was on Midway, not on Indian
No,
River.
no, on Indian River Drive.
On Indian River Drive.
It's a big house there right now with an enormous banyan tree in the front yard and a big metal peaked roof. But when Dad built it, he built it with a flat roof. And the 49 hurricane came and a limb broke off the tree and rolled that roof back onto the railroad tracks and filled the house and all Mother's hardwood floors, filled the house full of water. And so I'm assuming he didn't have proper insurance or whatever, because we never went back there. We left after that hurricane and go, you know, I mean, that was the only damage, was the roof was gone and the house filled up with water. We had a plate glass window in the front. He nailed a 2x4 down the front and stuck a pillow behind it. And I remember, well, I had to have been about 7 or so. You could see it move. And but anyway, so from there we lived for a while in a little house at the corner of Orange and Indian River Drive, where there was a big white house on the corner at Orange and Indian River Drive, and there was a little shacky house right next to it. It's where the parking lot all is now. And we lived there long enough. I used to pick mangoes and take them up and sell them at McCrory's up on 2nd Street. But I guess I did. Well, I used to camp up there, and you know, but we lived right in, you know, down there for long enough. I guess Dad built another house from there, or found something, or got his money together. Of course, from there, then we had a 5-house unit that he rented houses at over on 12th Street, North 12th, just off of Orange Avenue. But there were no screens in the house there on Orange and Indian River, and the squirrels came in and would sort of roam through the house. Mother one day caught one of them eating butter off the dining room table. So, but anyway.
No screens against the mosquitoes or anything?
Didn't have it. I mean, it was just, I mean, it was after the storm. I mean, our house was gone on the drive, and I don't know where this place came from, but it was a place to put a bed, and that was it, because we didn't have anything left, because everything we had was wiped out from the storm, from wet and rain and all that. And
Is that house still standing?
that house, they put this beautiful big metal roof on it. It's a big peaked roof house now. I've been in it one day. I went in it and visited with them one day, and they, you know, it's just, you know, I don't. It's not the same as I. But I was only what 7 or something at the time.
It was at 10th and Orange.
Oh, the little one down there?
Yeah.
No, the little house was
Oh.
where the parking lot is now.
No, I know. I mean, but then you said you moved out to 25th,
To 12th Street,
12th Street. Oh,
300 North 12th Street. That's where they put all this new house. It was 5 houses Dad bought. It was a 2-story house and a duplex on a wooden house in the back, and he was going to rent property.
Mhm.
And we lived there, and rentals wasn't my dad's thing. So
There were some of their classmates that lived along there, didn't
yeah, Emery Higgs lived back behind me. I don't know where Doug lived, somewhere nearby.
you? Doug Skaggs?
Yeah, Doug Skaggs, Troy. Remember Troy Air Conditioning, Bob Troy? The Troys lived back in behind us. Mahingi, the people that had the flower shop downtown.
Mendez?
I don't know.
Oh,
They
okay.
had a flower store downtown next to the Wilbur's.
And Marquita Rents, didn't she live over there?
I think she lived over on 11th.
On 11th.
On 11th. So, yeah, there was a lot of us in that area. And then from there, after Dad sold that property, got tired of trying to rent, we went over 1002 Georgia Avenue. And that's where we stayed and where I went to high school and all that.
Yeah.
So basically, I lived in town except a little bit of time on the drive. And I don't know a lot about the country and the woods and all that stuff. So,
Tell us about your grandfather.
well, I had a whole history of him when I was a kid, and it's all been gone or lost or whatever. But my grandfather was born in Norfolk, and somewhere or another he moved to Charleston, and he had one of those. If you ever been in a military town, military towns used to have a store right outside the base that you could buy all the uniforms and you could trade your gun in for something else, or So he made a lot of money as one of these stores right outside the base in Charleston.
Yes.
No, it was a thing that took care of the sailors. They had all the stuff that the sailor couldn't get on the base or couldn't find. Civilian clothes and new uniforms, or the uniforms that you couldn't buy, the special stuff, and so I guess he made a good bit of money from there. And then from there he went to Folly Beach and bought this property, the island just before Folly Beach. And he owned that whole island, and he had this major crab picking factory there, and seafood and boats and everything in there. But all I know is from family talking about it.
What did he do when he came here?
All I can figure is he was retired. He raised orchids. He had an orchid thing. He used to work a lot with the Fairchild Gardens. I know I used to hear him talking about going to Fairchild Gardens with his orchids, and he had I'm just thinking about that. He had an orchid house in the back of his place. One family tale that goes with Mom and Pop's house. Their house was at that last house was at. It's where the Palm Cemetery is, where Anaconda and Eldridge, where the sign is out there. It's 771 something anyway, 7100. You know where the Palms? Their house was next door to that, and we grew up there as kids. Mom and Pop would allow one of us at a time to visit, but we could never go together. So my cousin Trent, he could go 1 week, and my cousin Bobby could go 1 week, and then I could go 1 week. But he never allowed us together because we did get into trouble and did things. And Steve Sample, I did set I used to play with matches a lot back then, and I did set the whole back of the Palm Cemetery on fire, throwing matches, watching them, and doing all that stuff. But we lived out there, and we'd have all summer doing whatever we wanted. Mom didn't get up till around 9 or 10 in the morning, so we'd be up at 7 and out playing, and then we'd have to come in at 10 or 11 to have breakfast. And I mean, it was the neatest life, just on the thing there. But that house when my grandfather passed away, Mom moved into town to Chipola on Chipola Road, and so it was gone, and you know, it was a neat thing that all of us enjoyed. My sister married a guy here in town. Christine married Jeff Miller, and he had relatives out west and all over the place. Anyway, after Jeff passed away fairly young, and one time Chris was going to go visit some of Jeff's relatives that lived in Colorado, and they went out to Colorado to the relative's house, and which was somewhere in some town there, and they were talking to a relative about going skiing in Colorado, and the relative said, "Oh, I belong to this club that we've got people all over the state. Let me find somebody that lives in the area where the skiing is, and we'll call them and see if you can go, if they can help you with skiing." And the people, and he said, you know, the aunt called the people and said, "I've got a niece here that would like to go skiing. Can you help her?" And she, well, you know, yeah, she's from Florida, and you know, and yeah, okay. She went up and stayed at these people's house. Her and her children stayed at these people's house, and she got to the house, and the lady says, "I was so interested to meet you. They said you're from Florida. Where are you from?" And Christine said, "From Fort Pierce." And the lady says, "Oh, that's interesting. We own a property in Fort Pierce." I'm getting goosebumps again. They owned my grandparents' house. Woo woo. Another thing that was interesting about my grandparents, and when they lived on Folly Beach, my grandfather saved this young black boy from drowning. He had no family. He was drowning in a creek there, and they saved him, and he was always with the family. That was Joe. Don't know anything other about him other than when Pop came from South Carolina, Joe came with him. Joe was always there. There was always a room for Joe, or for a place for Joe, and whenever you cooked meals, there was enough food left for Joe. And when Pop passed away, Joe went to my Uncle Earl, and Uncle Earl had a place for Joe, because we were the only family that Joe had. And Joe would get drunk and rowdy or whatever with his friends somewhere in Fort Pierce, and he'd take off and go back to South Carolina, and then he'd get tired up there, and because he didn't have anybody up there, he just remembered, since they'd have to go get Joe. You know, somebody I remember Uncle Earl or Dad or somebody would have to go back to Charleston or Folly Beach and find Joe and bring him back home again. But Joe eventually, as the family story goes, Joe eventually went back up there on one of his forays and drowned in the same area that he was found as a young boy. But Joe was always there in our family. But Joe used to fish from Pop's house there on the drive, and he'd go out by himself, but none of us kids were allowed to go with him because Joe couldn't swim. And he'd go out fishing every morning and bring in these beautiful big fish and all that stuff, but nobody could go with Joe because
Go in a boat?
he'd go in a boat. The old wooden boat, and he had an old motor, and he'd go out to across from there. There's used to tie up to the navigational aids out there, and he'd go out there and fish in the early morning, and bring in fish every day, or not every day, but regularly.
And he lived with your grandparents?
He lived. There was always a place for Joe. If you go by that house by Anna, by the, it was at 700, I said. Anyway, if you go by that house, you'll see there's a little building in the back, like a little garage or a little tool shed. That was Joe's building. When Pop passed away and Mom moved to Chipola, Uncle Earl had the house on Cortez and Sunrise, at the corner of Cortez and Sunrise. They turned the garage, was at the far end, into a place for Joe. So Joe lived there.
It was a time of segregation.
But Joe didn't have anybody to go to.
But the neighbors didn't.
He was the yard guy. He was the family
Just
man.
the live-in yard guy.
He was Joe. I mean.
He was okay.
I mean, Joe just took care of things, and I don't. It was that way in many families, as I understand.
Oh.
We had our Joe. But he didn't live in town or whatever. He lived somewhere, you know. He was there. So everybody took care of Joe because Joe had been with the family since he was a little boy.
Oh.
So we were his only family. It was, sort of strange.
Talk a little bit about your Uncle Earl.
He came about the same time as my dad or whatever. He came to town. On Folly Beach, he had my dad worked at the shipyard, and I guess he worked for my pop or whatever. I don't know a whole lot about that. But Uncle Earl had a dance hall or juke joint, whatever you want to call, back in the 30s and 40s or whatever. And it was there even when I was stationed on a ship out of Charleston in '62, and it was still out there then, and the old home was still out there then. Now it's all gone. It's all condominiums, and the whole island is condominiums just before Folly Beach. But anyway, he had that, and then so he came down some in that same time frame in the early 40s. I don't know when. Bobby Joe or Trent or them might know. But and all I know, he was into used cars, and he had used cars, and then he got into travel trailers, and then he developed all that trailer parking stuff from the railroad tracks or from anyway south where Rick's Garden World is, wherever that is. All that back there is trailer parks that he sold and stuff. But I think he made most of his money with used cars. They're still there. They don't belong in the family anymore. I think Claudia sold them all off.
The one across the tracks is still there, but the one on the north side of the tracks is gone.
Yeah. So, but and they always at one point when we lived on the drive, they had a house just a couple houses from us up there on Hilltop. There's one that's way high up on the hill. It's been named Hilltop for years.
On North
A white
one?
on the Indian River Drive. South Indian River Drive. Again, north of Midway, there's a place in there still marked that.
Oh, Mike Summerlin lived there for a while.
Could have been. I don't know.
No, that would have been about the same time that they were there.
So anyway, that was all of my.
Well, now you said you had your sisters. Did you have any other?
Just me and my sister. My sister married Jeff Miller, who was Carol Miller. Did the interior decorating. That was his mom and Bud, Carol and Bud Miller. And my sister married Jeff, and then Jeff passed away, and then
Nancy Plymouth.
Yeah, and Nancy is Jeff's sister.
Yeah, okay.
And Nancy, Bart worked for the Tree Sweep people here. This is Nancy's husband.
Mm-hmm.
Bart worked for the Tree Sweep people here. When they had their family blow up, that's all I know to explain it. Something happened. The family broke apart. And Bart was working at the plant here, and whoever Bart was closest friends with took him or had him or hired him to go to Arcadia. And Bart runs the orange processing plant in Arcadia. They still
own the house.
They have one of the condos on the beach, and they have Carol Miller's house, which is in my complex where I live right now, which I've just this week put a new air conditioning in that house. No, I didn't do it. I mean, I got to finish it Tuesday when the inspector comes. But so Nancy still comes to town, and we're all in contact with each other. My sister married Jeff, and then when Jeff passed away, she moved down to Delray Beach where we lived at the time, and she went back and got her doctorate, and then worked for Florida Atlantic and worked for them doing something. And then she met a gentleman, her neighbor across the street's brother or whatever, and married him, and he had 8 children. He was a widower, had 8 children, and she moved to Chicago, and she lived in Chicago for.
When did she retire down here?
Whenever she got married and left. I don't know. I don't have a date or anything. I don't know.
She took over 8 children?
No, they were all grown.
Yeah.
lovely people, wonderful family, the greatest thing. But now she ends up with two families. She's got her own family and all of his family, and everybody wants her everywhere. So she travels all the time. She when he passed away, there was enough money and a lot of things that she bought a home in Grand Harbor in Vero, and so she lives. She has a home there, but she spends time between Washington D.C., where her son Jay is. He's with the Labor Department, and in Chicago, and then she's got a daughter, Pam. They have just moved to Niceville. They're dentists. Her and her husband are dentists in Niceville. They've just moved there. They were dentists for the Indians, for the Apaches, and then something up in New York and all that stuff. And they've gotten into. I don't
You
know.
have an interesting family.
It's fun. It's been interesting people.
What did you do?
Hmm?
What did you do?
Well, I went to college. I mean, I when I got out of high school, one of the funny things in the family is who was it? Who was that? One of my teachers in high school said, "You're gonna go far as long as you're in a boat." That was my shop teacher in high school. My dad used to quit. My dad loved to travel. That was his thing. All he ever wanted was trips. He wanted to go someplace. We spent a month in Mexico. We camped all the way over to Mexico. Again, they can't catch us if it ever gets back. My dad didn't pay all his taxes ever. There was a lot of extra money left at the end of each year, and he would use that to travel, but he couldn't spend it where anybody would see him spend it. So we'd go somewhere else to spend it. So we spent a month in Mexico. He bought a trailer one time, and we hauled it. We spent 2 weeks in Washington, D.C., and 2 weeks in New York City. He spent 3 weeks in New England after I was in the service. We were on one of the first cruise ships that did the Caribbean, where we ended up, after we got out there, we had another whole stateroom, and but Dad used to love to travel, so I've got the travel bug, and so I joined the Navy. All the 40s, 50s, talking about the war and the Mediterranean and all that stuff. So I was going to go in the military and all that stuff, but before that I tried going to college and made all F's, and I was not a good studier. One of my friends from back then, I gave him, when I was in college, we were making homebrew, and I gave Mike Brennan the recipe for homebrew. Was it Judge Brennan now or whatever? Or he got in a lot of trouble for it. It didn't ruin his career, but it kept me from going on. I eventually became an alcoholic and all that. And I've been sober for 25 years, or more. But so anyway, I went to college, drinking homebrew, making all F's. I had taken some tests in the Air Force, for the Air Force in high school, and the Air Force said I was do very well, and I'd do really good and I did really good on their tests, and I could have any job I wanted. But I went to college instead and failed, and I was failing out, and so I went back to the Air Force to talk to them about these tests, and they'd lost them, and they wanted me to take this whole battery of tests over again, and I was thinking about it, and the Navy guy, the Navy recruiter, this was down in West Palm at the post office down, Navy recruiter was listening to what they were saying, and I came out, the Navy recruiter, and honestly, this is what he said: "Hey kid, come over here, I got a deal for you." And he talked me into going to nuclear power submarines, and so I went in the Navy and went through all the training and stuff in nuclear power submarines. And I was on one old diesel boat, which was required at the time, and then I did 2 new construction ships, one that had just come into New London, and another one out of Norfolk.
How long were you in the Navy?
I was in the Navy 8 years, and I was on fast attack ships, which were fast attack submarines. We were gone at least 75% every year, and they had FBMs. They were gone. They had 2 crews, and they were in and out of port, and 6 months at a time. At least you're home 50% of the year. And I said, I want to stay in, but I want to get on an FBM. And they said, oh no, you've done too good a job on new construction. We're going to send you back to new construction. So I got out after 8 years. Because I had been gone all the time, and so I came home to Fort Pierce and couldn't find work. I was working for Jimmy Grimes at $3.50 an hour installing ACs back in '68, '69. And then I went to work with my dad, and then I called the Coast Guard about going in Coast Guard reserves because this is all I knew about the Coast Guard was this wonderful station over here. I've never been. I never really researched things real well, And so I called the Coast Guard to go about reserves, and he said, "Oh, I've got a deal for you." And and so.
The only thing different, he didn't say, "Hey, kid."
No, and so because I was in E6 at the time, fairly, I had good rank, and they were going to give me everything back, and no, and I went back to work, and my wife came home an hour later, and the phone rang, and this was in November, and the Coast Guard, they said, "I'm the Coast Guard recruiter. I want to talk to your husband about joining up." And she says, "He's not going to go back in the service." By December, we were on our way back to Norfolk, so she was.
So how long did that spend?
I stayed 12 years in the Coast Guard, and made Chief Warrant Officer, and retired, and went through all that. I wanted out a lot of times. I had a very close friend of mine was a financial advisor, and he talked me into staying, and it was the greatest thing that I ever did. I told him, "Well, I'll get a job on the outside." He says, "What's it going to make, and what's your retirement going to be?" And well, I don't know. I'll figure it out. And I'm smart, but anyway, I did stay until retirement, and
Where'd you meet your wife?
Sophie's from Delray Beach. She's a fourth-generation Floridian. Her family is the Saunders family that's written up in the Marjorie Rollins books in that Ocala thing. They owned part of Ocala National Forest on a Spanish land grant and lost it because it. Saunders.
B-U, S-A-U-N.
But so anyway, we both went to
What was her name?
Sophie Fry.
F-R-Y.
So F-R-E-Y.
F-R-E-Y.
Her grandmother, that was the Saunders side, was her mother's side. The Fry side was her grandmother's side, her dad's side. Mrs. Fry came down in 1904 with 4 children and no husband, and settled in Delray Beach and started a truck farm and was raising pineapples to be sent back to New Jersey. And all the kids got either worked in the trades or fishermen. There were fishermen, and they all started out doing pineapples and pineapple boxes and all that stuff. Sophie's daddy had started out building pineapple boxes and was a finished carpenter in his old, as he got older and better. But so there's still a property. There's a whole subdivision there. It's named Sophie Fry subdivision, which they turned the property into lots, and they slowly sold them off, and everybody lived off of that for so many years, just selling little pieces of lots. But there was a song written for a historical society thing down in Delray one time, and they sang it. It was "With a little bit of muck, we'll get along," and it was selling the muck land, and the muck land was some of the first stuff that they sold on the intercoastal down there, and in Sophie's family. That was from the first stuff they got rid of, that waterfront stuff on the intercoastal. But she went to junior college. That was her. She'd never been very, she never did things like that, or, gone to a lot of school stuff. She had a boyfriend for years, and they just go to the movie and stuff. But she went to a party with a bunch of, her first big college party. It was out at Adams Ranch, somewhere west of Palm Beach, or Lake Worth out there. And it was a pay your $2, and you could drink all the beer you wanted. And I went with Steve Missick, and Steve and I were so drunk we couldn't even, there was an accident, we couldn't tell whether the car was black or white. We argued about that for days. But I ran into this little girl, and we got talking, and then I told her I was going to go get sick, and then I came back and said I wasn't, and very strange conversation, you know. And then she went out to leave, and she went out to get in her car, and there was a midget passed out in her car. His car, he went to our college with us, and his car looked like her car. So I carried him to his car, and then I carried her to her car. And I don't remember any of that. I mean, I remember some of it, you know. And then after that, I would see her every day or every once in a while. And then Steve quit school and joined the Army, and all of a sudden I had this guy I never knew offered me a chance to room with him. I didn't have a chance in the world of not marrying her. All of a sudden I had friends. We're still friends with this guy that I roomed with back then today. But she was taking care of me and watching out for me, and so then I quit, and, you know, I joined the Navy, and then we got married later on. But it was.
Do you remember the date you got married?
It's always been inside my ring, and I'm going to get my ring redone. November 28th. No, October 12th. October 12th. 60. I don't remember what it was. I haven't worn my. I was an electrician in the military, and I couldn't wear my ring, and even climb up and down in ships. You always worry about tearing. This was my 40th wedding anniversary present. She said, "That was a lovely sentiment, but don't ever do that again." So I'm getting my wedding ring sized for our 50th wedding anniversary, and I just went down to Sweets the other day and talked to them. You know, they can do it, and so I'm getting that. So I'm going to try to, but it still won't cover. See the web of my finger, it'll never cover it again. But I'll put it back on it.
I kind of think it's a good idea. I kind of like that idea.
What's
I don't
that?
wear mine because I play with them all.
Yeah, well, you know, she mentioned it a couple of times, but I did for AA. I did jail visitations for 6 years in Martin County, and the guys there said it's some of the worst tattoos. I paid $50 for that, and they said it's one of the worst tattoos they ever seen. They said, "Bring me in some pens and some ink, and I'll fix it for you." But so anyway, I made a career as an electrician in the Navy and the Coast Guard. Retired as a W-3, got out, really, I went out and worked in the oil fields for a while on the ships. I got my engineer's license, quit in the same month. That was scary out there. There's no, you know, running those ships and taking care of stuff, and it was, you know, and then I finally, I was doing handyman work, and I did handyman work for 20-something years, different condominiums and things, and then I was in real estate for a couple of years, and
That's after you retired?
after I retired, yeah.
The second time or the first time?
I only retired the one time from when I came out of the Coast Guard.
Oh, okay, that time.
Between the Navy and the Coast Guard, I worked for Jimmy Grimes, and I worked for my dad. And one of the, you know, like, working for my dad, it was, you know, we were always butting heads about things, and one of the interesting things was, if you went in the store at 712 Orange, there was a wall there which had been there from when we used to live in the back, and it went 3/4 of the way across the back, and you could see people come in. If they came in the front door on the left side, they could see in the back, and they could go back there. If they came in on the right side, they would come to that wall and turn and leave. So anything that was in that back half of the store, nobody would look at, or, you know, it was just, sort of cut. And I said, "Dad, we need to take the wall down." "Oh, that wall's been there since 44. You know, so we battled about it, and, you know, discussed it off and on. And after I'd been in the Navy about 6 months or so, I was the Coast Guard, about 6 months or so, we were up in Norfolk, and we'd get letters from Mom and everything. And one of the letters said, "Your dad came up with the neatest idea today." Well, he put a hole in it, and he put some stuff around it so it would look interesting to people to go through, you know. But your dad came up with the neatest idea today. So, but you know, it was.
When did you come back to Fort Pierce?
I retired in Panama City. We stayed in Panama City for 14 years. I told my girls if we could, I'd let them graduate from the same high school, you know, and they both got to graduate, and they both went to Tallahassee. They had a campus there, and then they went up there, and they both graduated from college and everything there. And then I kept saying I wanted to get back to South Florida. I don't know if you've ever spent much time in the Panhandle. The Panhandle is a storm all the time, year-round. It's either gray or whatever. Most beautiful beaches in the world, but the weather, in year-round weather, is just horrible. It gets to be 2 degrees sometimes when the bad winter's coming through, and I mean it's not Florida at all. And I kept wanting to talk to Sophie about coming back to South Florida, and she said, "You get a job in South Florida and we'll go." And I was just handyman. There was no way I could afford to do that. But Sophie did. She was a medical transcriptionist, which all through our military career, our time together, she was always able to get a job. And wherever you're at, the transcriptionists were always wanted. They're almost gone now. They've disappeared. But she got into a thing there in Bay Hospital. They used to send somebody from Miami to do cancer data collection back then, and they used to fill out a little 3x5 card for cancer data collection. And this lady would come up and do from Tallahassee over to Pensacola, and they were talking, and the lady says, "You want the job?" And Sophie said, "I don't know." And so Sophie went and took the job, and she could work it part-time where she worked at the Bay Hospital, and ended up involved at a position open in West Palm. So she was able to pass that on to somebody else, the Panhandle area, onto somebody else, and we moved to West Palm, and we lived in Delray. And we bought a home there, and I refurbished it, and then from there, and we kept getting robbed in Delray. They stole our bicycle one Easter Sunday. We were at church, and they were going to steal a car from the house next door, and Sophie caught them, and my sister's purse got stolen out of her car in the driveway when she came one day. So we moved from there to Stewart, and we lived in Stewart for 11 years. And then both of us turning 70, getting close, we decided to get rid of the big house and downsize. And we looked everywhere from Apalachicola to Pompano Beach and couldn't find anything that we liked that fit for us. And then we saw these. We were over at Carol Miller's house, the Plymouth zone now. We were looking at that and trying to talk them into selling. They wouldn't sell it as long as Mama was alive, and so we found another place over there at the Villages of Longwood, and moved there and been real happy. You know, we've been home 2 years now. Been here 2 years, I think.
Tell me about your experience in high school.
Well, I was weird. I used to ride a bicycle and wear a black leather jacket. I was strange. But I grew up. One time we were traveling. Sophie and I were traveling one of our mini trips back and forth, north and south, and I came into a Howard Johnson's, and somebody sitting way over in the corner hollered out, "There's that mean little Freddie Ebner," and it was Judy Fee.
Oh my God.
And so I wasn't really mean. I was eccentric, and I always was. I mean, I grew up, my dad's business was on D. We were in the junk store. I was one of the first kids to have white bucks. One of them was a 9 and one was 11. I had papered in because he bought a bunch of clothing down there, you know. I had leather jackets when nobody else could afford them because people would pawn them in my dad's store. You know, I'd pick up trash alongside the street because I could sell it at the store. So I'm still a little eccentric at times, you know. I try to. Sophie tones me down a little bit, but I get.
Did you feel like an outsider?
I was me. I felt like an outsider, but I didn't care, you know. I've had a good life, you know. All the problems you do at 17, 18, 19, you know, and trying to get through those ages. But other than that, you know.
Were you embarrassed by the junk store?
Not at all. I think my sister was. I mean, to me, that was. I mean, I still live it today. I mean, to get out of Stewart, I made $4,000 on a yard sale just from the junk in my garage. I made $400 on scrap metal of stuff I'd collected. I mean, it's been in my life, all my life.
Like a trade?
Everything gets into value. Everything has value. I want to sell it, you know, or I'm save used but good stuff, you know. So I'm trying to get rid of more stuff now. I'm still renting a little building down there to keep junk in, and you know.
Filling it
It's just Adrian. I went over to Adrian's house, Adrian Strickland, to get the bed ready to move. I built something underneath to keep the dogs out. And Adrian, well, you want some of this? You need some tools. You need that. You know, I don't want anything. I'm trying at 70. I'm trying to get rid of it all. I don't know if I ever will or not. But Sophie says when I'm gone, she's just going to open the garage and put a sign out there: free stuff. So, more power to her.
So you're not using your garage at the villages
Uh,
along with it?
Well, yeah, I'm using it. I'm building cabinets and I've got saws and things in there. But I really feel that I could spend an hour and I could get her car in there. I really, moving stuff around and everything. I've got it. It's not totally taken over with junk. It's all tools. Although at Christmas, we went to the Keys. I got into a kayak club in Stewart. I've been kayaking a lot in the area, and I love that. And at Christmas, I took my kayaks down, and my daughter and her boyfriend came down, and I was sitting in a chair in a couch, and I couldn't stand up, and I couldn't get out of the couch. I couldn't get my body right or anything, and I couldn't walk most of the week we were down there. I didn't unload any of my kayaks. I couldn't get my hands up in the air to get them off of the kayaks. Off the truck. And so we came home and they, through 2 or 3 doctors and everything, I've been diagnosed with PMR, polymyalgia rheumatica. It comes on between 65 and 70. They don't know what causes it. There's no known cure. It lasts 2 to 9 years. And the only thing they can do is give you prednisone to get rid of the pain. So it takes me until about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning until I can move and raise my arms and do things and get out of bed and, and get around and all that. And then at about 5, then I need my pill again. And at 12 o'clock, I'm feeling fine and I don't want to go to bed. So, but I went out kayaking. I asked the association, we have a pond behind our house off of Nebraska, and the trash had blown off the street out there, and I didn't want to complain to the association because I had a kayak and I could go out there and pick up the trash if they'd allow me. So I went to the homeowners association. I said, can I take my kayak out there and clean up the trash? And they agreed. I said, I'm not complaining, and everything. So they agreed. So Sophie and my neighbor came out to watch me, and I got in the kayak and I couldn't get my body to move. I couldn't get any of my muscles to pull me right. So I'm laying in the kayak, paddling like this, having them guide me around, and I'm guiding around. And I got all the trash picked up that I wanted to pick up, and then I went back in, and I couldn't get out of the kayak, so I had to bring it to the shore and roll off into the mud and then get out and everything. This is the type of things that I do, and I don't think anything about it. They had a complaint from somebody at the association. There were 2 kids playing in a boat out in the pond with their parents watching them. I guess my tummy was one and my knees were the others. So, I don't think of anything strange of any of this. Other people think that, just stuff I do. But anyway, so the PMR is we control it. I just can't work like I used to work, which worked out great. This didn't happen until after I'd quit all my handyman projects. I worked at 2 or 3 condominiums and things. I like fixing stuff. But anyway.
Do you find Fort Pierce a lot different than when you grew
Major
up?
difference. Major difference.
Better or worse?
Worse. It's and I don't think it's ever going to come back. I've thought about it since I've been here, since I've been coming here. I don't think we're ever going to get it back. I think that what they're doing with the downtown part is wonderful. They're saving a little section of it, but unless they manage to get somebody in here or get some businesses in to start moving west of US 1, because I've been daydreaming, and I talk about the Knowles house and my dad's business. What Jack Crane has done with that whole corner on 7th and Orange. I just think if I win the lottery and I buy that, and I'd like to turn it into a major like craft place, and where a craftsman artist could set up and stay permanent, all in that back property that's within the fence and all that stuff. And I dreamed of all that. But honestly and truly, there's nothing between there and downtown. You've got a big 2 or 3 block blank area there where there's nobody has any business. I mean, even including ranch land. I mean, it's all void. So unless you can get somebody into these places, and, you know, we're sitting with the post office empty, all those buildings, and I keep hoping. I thought the courthouse would do something, but I don't guess it is. But something has to be done from US 1 West to revitalize. Delray Beach took and they bought that whole corridor that comes in off of 95, and they bought it and they've torn down buildings, and what buildings they didn't, they forced them into dressing up so they at least have a corridor to come in, so when people come in. But I mean, I worked with Delray Beach. They were trying to put in a 5-story monstrosity in downtown Delray Beach. They've got streets going one way and the other. I built a model of downtown out of styrofoam and plywood, and we fought the city and we stopped that one. They wanted to put in I got in with some real nutcase, you know, people trying to save the city. They were trying to put in a high-density rental thing within 4 blocks of my house down there, and we, you know, I say we. I just went to all the meetings and did all the stuff and stood up and mumbled at this commission meetings. But
It seems like somebody took my sister Linda down there as a model, or to Delray as a model for what could be done here.
we don't have enough people. See, they have people that live in town that maintain it. All our people, I mean, the thing that it gets me is, why did the Presbyterians get rid of their church? Why did the Baptists get rid of their church? Everybody that has any money or done anything, they've all moved out in the country. They've moved away. So we don't have anybody in town to fight to keep the town. All we've got is people that come to town to do the little bit we've got in that little 2 or 3 block area, but we don't have town people.
Do you think it has to do with integration?
Oh, without a doubt. But the thing is, we took these poor people that were slaves and all that stuff for years, and then all of a sudden we give them rights and we give them all this stuff, but nobody really gives it to them. They still have to fight for it every day. You know, I mean, it's a whole battle I don't even like to get into. As an ex-real estate agent, I can't talk about this. You know, you know how that goes. But yes, it has to do with integration. It has to do with the whole thing. But then again, we had integration. And see, I have strong feelings of Miami. I love Miami. I learned to drive in Miami. My dad used to spend lots of time with a business in Miami. If the Cubans had not come to Miami, Miami wouldn't be much better than Fort Pierce or Palm Beach. The Cubans have saved Miami and made it into a major world metropolis. And you know, we don't have anything here to save us. The only people we're getting here is Haitians. And they're not going to bring us back. They're bringing us down. We're getting Mexicans. They're laborers. The laborers, we don't even have the old labor buses. The laborers are all in these little 16-passenger vans running in and out now out there. We don't even have the number of laborers we used to have. So we've got a lot of people that are just living off the government and the dole and all that stuff now. How do you turn that around? I mean, I think I've seen Fort Pierce. I think the police department has done a wonderful job in Fort Pierce from what I've came here and what it is today. There used to be at least 4 or 5 women of the street at the corner of 12th and Orange Avenue every day for years. All that is gone. Orange Avenue is cleaned up. There's nobody out there. All those ladies have disappeared. But they went with the drug thing. So the drug thing has been cleared up to some. I mean, you're never going to clear it up entirely. It's moved out to the northwest area out there, northwest of 25th and D and out in that way. But still, we've got a town full of migrant laborers, and you know, I mean, I lived a half a block from was it Moores Creek. And that's where I was when I was, what, 8 to 12 or 8 to 14 or something like that before we moved to Georgia Avenue. That was integration and kept things separated, and everybody, you know. but there is no separation, which I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just we gave people rights that they were supposed to have, but we didn't give them, the means. And the school systems aren't helping a whole lot. I don't think. I don't know. Anyway, it's a tough. I've got opinions, but I think I'll die with them more than. I don't know how to fix it. See, I'm really upset with Carl Hyacin because he's written all these books. He knows what all the problems are, and he's written all these fabulous books about what we need to do to fix Florida. But all he does is sit up in Vero and get all his royalties from his books. He's not running for governor or running for president like I think he should. So that, because he's got the answers, but I don't, we're the problem.
Yeah, it wouldn't be so easy if you were in there and had.
I know that. I'm just joking. I don't know. If anybody had an answer, I'd be glad to help them. I mean, I get upset with all these living in Stewart. What was the Tea Party people? They'd get on the bridge over there, and they were all there. And you drive over the bridge, and they all had signs. They're against things, but every sign said something different. So how can a group of people get together if they don't even have the same problem? It was like you go across and it'd be 50 different problems. If you're going to fight against something, you got to fight for the same thing. Anyway.
I can't think of anything else. Can you? Anybody?
Can you think of anything else you'd like to?
No, I love being home. It's a great little town, and I've got some great, growing up here, we've got a lot of nice people still here. I love walking in and out of the store, grocery store, and seeing, oh, look, was it Nick Steele I saw last week, and somebody else, you just run into people. My daughter,
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say with my daughter. Both my daughters are military brats. They didn't have. We moved every 3 years, and we were all over the East Coast and everything else. And my one daughter was having a problem with something later in life, and she says, I'm so upset. I just want to go home. Where's our home? So she picked Cape Cod. We lived on Cape Cod for 2 years. She thought that was the best place to have for a home.
That's her home. Huh?
Yeah.
So, are you related to Rick Ebner?
Rick is it was Bobby, Joe, Trent, and Rick. They are my first cousins.
Ah.
So, and Bobby Joe is extremely ill right now with cancer. Don't know how she's going to do. Trent lives over in
Where
Oak.
does she live?
Her husband has built a house in Hiawassee, Georgia. Her children, one of her daughters is still in Ohio. So for medical thing, for all this cancer work and everything, she's back in Ohio. And one of her sons lives down here somewhere. I don't know where the other one I think is in Ohio. And Trent, my cousin Trent lives over in Okeechobee. And he's I don't know what he does, works on things, but he's also the lease manager for Desiree Ranch. Do you ever know about Desiree Ranch?
Mm-hmm.
I never knew it existed. Desiree Ranch is a major Mormon ranch, 120-something thousand acres west of Melbourne, and they lease out 10,000-acre plots. And my cousin's been a lease for hunting.
We used to have a lease on it.
Yeah,
Who's
and
your
he's been
cousin?
Trent.
Trent.
He's the lease manager for one out there, somewhere out there, and has been for 20 years or something. But they've got all this stuff out there, all this equipment. They got in trouble one year with the Mormons for they had to go through all their money because he can't make money off of it. But the electric bill was higher than anybody else. But they've got all these he's got these doctors and lawyers and all these people have all their stuff set up. They have a full freezer out there, and they have a whole big work building and all this stuff out there. So their electric bill was higher than anybody out there. So they had to prove to the Mormons that that it was all, above board and what it all was. But it's not. Everybody got 50-foot trailers, and it's neat. If you like being out in the woods all the time, we say good.
I love being out there. Ours was called Lucky Pond.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a massive place out there. But anyway, okay.
I appreciate you coming in today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's, you think about your family and they're all gone. I can't get anybody in the family together again. Bobby Joe's so ill, and I talked to Trent, and he's busy with that, or he's busy over in Okeechobee, and I don't see Rick too often, and we've all
Some
separated.
old pictures of like the store and.
Not a whole lot. I've got a video I've put back together. My sister and Dad drove around, and I was going to give you a disc of it when I get a chance. I'm still trying to. I took the whole big box of the old 8mm and threw them in a thing, and took them all to Costco. But now they've come out in a jumble. You don't know what you've got. So I figured that it's taken me 2 years now to figure. Excuse me, how to download them, how to turn them into a movie, and all that stuff. And then my computer died, so now I got to buy a new computer. So anyway, but I don't. All my pictures that we had of the family and all that stuff. My dad. I told you my dad worked for King Signs. Well, my mother passed away. My dad, they gave him 9 weeks to live. He had cancer of the aorta in the chest. They opened him up. They closed him up. His arm didn't work anymore, right? He couldn't carry the grandkids. And we all sat around for 9 months and waiting for him to die. And then my mother went totally crazy waiting for him to die. My dad lived 13 more years. My mom passed away in the middle there. And my dad married Holly King, Bob King, King Signs, and later on, so I ended up with the stepmother, Holly King, and they ended up they had a great time. They spent a lot of time running off to Reno and stuff. My dad died owning about. He gave everything to Holly. He had about $6,000, and that was it. And he didn't care. He was having a good life, so he lived a good life.
He must have been.
Oh, he was unbelievable. Yeah. Oh, there's tales and tales and tales, But anyway.
Well, you can always tell your daughters that it will have this film on file.
Okay.
If they want to come see the family.
Okay.
history.
Yeah, I will. And